Good morning. So my research was based off of musicianship in the instrumental classroom. My presentation was supposed to be about finding a lesson plan that was from a D51 teacher that could be used as a good example of intentional lesson planning. Unfortunately, what I ran into was the fact that very few of them really do lesson plan, and the fact that they wouldn't really get back to me, and that's understandable given the circumstances. Their lesson plans obviously very different now. Their focus is different now with the online schooling. So there was a little bit of revamping with this. So I wanted to focus on this intentional lesson planning from a theoretical perspective. And I think it's still important and helpful for your instrumental classroom in the future. So it's all about how to create efficiency in the instrumental classroom as well as the musicianship. So I found this resource, McCrell International. It's an education website that is more for your common core classrooms. So your math and your English and all of that. So there was some transfer that had to be made from what they were basing these four key things that all teachers should think about when intentionally lesson planning. They had these four. I put them into a transfer to the music classrooms. The four are: make the most of every minute, help students develop deep knowledge, coach students to mastery, and help students do something with their learning. Their basis was you need these four elements to create an intentional lesson plan that was successful and efficient. So make the most of every minute. My transfer for this was pacing. I think we could focus on the specifics of lesson planning and making sure that every minute is detailed out, but really it's your pacing that makes a huge difference on your success in your classroom. Pacing is one of the most effective ways to create a successful or unsuccessful rehearsal. If you're too slow, you lose focus from your students. If you're too fast, they have a hard time understanding and keeping up with the information. It's important to have a scaffolded sequence that is repeatable. I put like Mr. Lavity at GGHS. We observed him earlier this semester, and his system was absolutely flawless. He knew exactly how to plan out his warm-up sequence. He knew exactly how to plan out his day, and his pacing was spot on, and it was repeatable. It was a repeatable process. And I think that's really important for students because they like structure and they like schedule. Helped students develop deep knowledge. So my transfer for this was matching the standards with the component skills and musicianship from Robert Duke. So each guideline set by the US and state education standards must be meticulously matched with how the students learn, what the student needs to learn, and how the repertoire will promote the learning process and what deliberate focus is necessary for the day. That's a lot of information all in one. But the point is that you have to know exactly what standard matches with exactly what component skill and exactly what your focus is that day in order to develop this deep knowledge over time, because it's not a one-day thing. It's not a one concert thing. The most successful process I've seen in this is to create a rehearsal schedule. And what I talk about in my research paper is this is not a one-day rehearsal schedule. This is not a one-week rehearsal. This is not a 1 month. It's an entire semester where you have flexibility in that. You have to, but the process is that every day I know that I am working on this music. So by scheduling, my third point here, by scheduling segments of music to be rehearsed, how often they need to be rehearsed based on difficulty, and again, matching the skills of musicianship that are focused for the day, the week, the month, or year, teachers can find more success meeting their goals as opposed to starting at the beginning of the piece again. I think we find most often, and we see it in our observations a lot, where the teacher will just say, okay, let's just start from the beginning again. Or every day, that's the plan. So the beginning of the piece becomes really effective. They've memorized it almost, but by the end of the piece, it starts to break down, and we see that in concerts actually. So the point is to have a scheduled rehearsal schedule, excuse me, that is detailed out. Okay, today, Monday, whatever, I am going to work through this piece measures 1 through 10. This piece measures 30 through 35. This piece based off of this. And that is all detailed out by you as the teacher in order to make sure that every part of the piece is matched and worked on, that you can have a repeatable process so they understand we're only getting this much information on this piece. It's repeatable. You can go back another day and say, we need more work on this, and it's all flexible. Coach students to mastery. So I think really my last information kind of dovetails into this and really brings us through the process. But the transfer in this is lesson plans in action. So combining component skills and musicianship with pacing and detailed long-term action plans, and actually following through of putting those action plans in rehearsal, because you can have the most well laid out plans, but if you don't walk into that classroom every day and say, this is what I'm doing and I'm following my action plan, again, with flexibility and understanding of certain circumstances, especially as we've been in now, if you don't do that, you won't be near as successful as the teacher that does. And that's proven time and time again. So I would encourage you to renew your rehearsal goals to include a relentless pursuit of musicianship in every lesson. And that's what I've seen through the McREL International process, through individual teachers observing them. Their process teachers that are really successful have rehearsal goals every day with a long-term pursuit of musicianship, and it is detailed over time, and it's that relentless pursuit of musicianship in every lesson. Help students do something with their learning. So this is a quote from my research paper, and I thought it was interesting because we've kind of been talking about this all semester. The transfer of learning is the term used to describe applying what one has learned in a particular situation to another in a different context. The goal of our English class is not to have students pass this exam, but to be competent and critical lifelong writers and readers. The goal of studying history is not to memorize the dates of major battles, but to develop a broad historical perspective that they can apply to understanding the world around them today and in the future. You can see that citation in my research paper that's attached to this discussion post. The true assessment of musical literacy is the reproduction of skills and behaviors in new circumstances, new material, new ensembles, etc. So it does you no good as a musician to learn in your method book, this is what this dot means, if I can't take that information and transfer it to other music, other information. So if your goal as a teacher is to focus on articulation, you have to find a way to intentionally lesson plan so that your students have that long-lasting transfer of information. And then you have to find a new way for them to be able to apply that information. So they've discovered something, we need to find a way to apply that information, or else the learning process cannot really sink in. So in conclusion, it is not enough to hand students a piece of paper with dots and lines and have them put the correct name to the dot or symbol. In order to be lifelong effective musically literate learners, students must be given the opportunity to transfer their understanding of information to a new circumstance in order to assess learning outcomes. So that word assess is thrown around a lot in education. You have to find a way that you can long-term assess this. And this is how the transfer of information and the transfer of skill to new circumstances. So it would appear that the level of musicianship produced in music students is not so much determined by the sequence of method books, but the daily choices of the instructors. It is the intentional teacher that understands his or her students that finds success in the music classroom when paired with a plan and wise choices. So yes, have a plan. Be intentional with it. Follow these 4 steps to be intentional, and you can find success in your classroom. And that's the end of that. If you have any questions, please comment them and I will try to get you more information. A lot of these are more detailed in my research paper, and if you want any of these sources, you can let me know. Thanks, guys.